Welcome to the Frogs of Sweden podcast. We figured if Sweden didn't have frogs, frogs wouldn't have Sweden. This is the story of how a tribe of frogs who reside in geodesic domes release love into the VELF wavelengths of the Earth, also known as the magnetic fields, to hopefully stop the evil and suffering of humankind. Today is a very special episode. Today we will be exclusively talking about the power of art and imagination. We will be talking to 4 artistic geniuses about their stance on the spiritual side of art. In addition, our musical guests are very special to me and this universe. We hope you enjoy this episode immensely. Our first guest is artistic genius Alex Gray, a visual artist, performing artist, author, teacher, and spiritual practitioner on his stance on art.
Art and music can be a spiritual practice, bringing us closer to the divine. And there may be no more powerful integrative tools for examining and healing our soul than the creative arts. We can activate and magnify the artist archetype within us by directly expressing our truth, psychologically and spiritually, in whatever medium best suits us. Creative writing, singing, composing music, drawing or painting, sculpting, animating, whether digital or physical, dancing or designing, there are more ways today to share our creativity than ever before. But even if you never share the work with another person, your art can still be a meaningful therapeutic adventure for investigating your unconscious, your shadow, and clearing some negativities responsibly. Listen to some music you like sometime and make a drawing. Really beautiful lines can stream out of you. And if you're feeling up or down, you can channel that energy into an object. I think of a really negative emotion as like a monster in a box. The box is my head. And by putting it on paper, it no longer has the power to overwhelm by its invisibility. The monster is out of the box, and like a diary of your shadow, you can use the vantage point of seeing your negative state to give you a new objectivity. In fact, that's the healing magic in making art. You apply the psychological leverage of making your previously hidden subjective state literally into an object. Art can help us face ourselves and identify the healing needed to become both self-actualized and self-transcending. Creativity can help restore a shattered self and become a form of redemption, a restoration of inner balance, beauty, and flow from our center. This spring season is a great time to contemplate and plant seeds for the next creative project so it can grow with the light of the season. We see that art is great at mining our unconscious and expressing our drama, and that it will help us become whole people. But how do we awaken spiritual liberation with creativity? Before any artwork is created, there's the intention, the wish to make art. Art begins with a deliberate decision in our consciousness, sparked by an inspiring force. Because art is solidified intention, if it is to be a spiritual practice, it should be a form of worship and service. In Mahayana Buddhist teachings, it's said that unless one has the proper motivation, one will never advance very far on the spiritual path or attain enlightenment. If we embrace bodhicitta, the altruistic intention to practice and gain liberation for the benefit of all beings, including ourselves, our practice will bear fruit. This is based on the understanding that we're all connected. Therefore, if we wish to make truly spiritual art, we maintain compassionate aspirations to uplift everyone with our works. By aligning our artistic will with the divine will, we can create, informed by bodhicitta, the model intentions of a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is an enlightened one, an ideal archetype of wisdom and compassion, who makes the unreasonable vow to reincarnate to the world of suffering for the well-being of all living creatures. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they say that it's possible to plant seeds of liberation in the mind streams of viewers with art. This is what all potent sacred art can do. And what an amazing spiritual intention to bring into one's work. Art uplifts people, not only when they create it, but also when they view it. To make art a spiritual path, open your inner ears and eyes. Pray for visions. Pray as you work. Inwardly ask for spiritual assistance in your task. And then watch for God's messages that pierce your heart. Making art for God's sake honors the special messages and visions that we've been given and fulfills our soul's task. Art can be a step on the ladder of self-actualization and liberation. The artist's mission is to create like an alchemist, experimenting toward discovery of the philosopher's stone. The great work, the magnum opus of the alchemist, was transforming gross material, symbolized by lead, into gold, a spiritualized substance. Each object, carefully handmade with devotional energies, can be a clear transmitter of spiritual light, a battery of soul-centered love energy. The receptive, contemplative viewer is charged and renewed by those repositories of mystic power. Art is a mighty, instinctual force implanted in the hearts of the human species who've been creating beauty for over 40,000 years. Art is the oldest religion, creative spirit made visible, and a touchstone of the soul even today. Art is not mere amusement, distraction, or investment. The function and mission of art is to awaken our dormant spiritual faculties to serve and enrich the community. As artists, at the dawn of the 21st century, we have the unique opportunity to create universal spiritual art, born from visions of unity and the re-emergence of sacred archetypes in the collective unconscious. For those of us who have seen psychedelic heaven worlds, visionary art provides a unifying language. Artworks that transmit mystic visionary reality and affirm transcendental truth are sacred and meant to be shared. Thank you to the worldwide love community for joining COSM in building Entheon, Sanctuary of Visionary Art, created by artists from around the world to honor and preserve cultural artifacts inspired by the divine source. To close, here is a quote from the great mystic Plotinus of the 4th century. It reminded me of Entheon. Since we look towards the outside, away from the point at which we are all joined together, we are unaware of the fact that we are one. We are like faces turned toward the outside, but attached on the inside to one single head. If we could turn around, then all at once, we would see God, ourselves, the all.
Thank you for that very lyrical lecture. Now here is one of my artistic idols, Julian Costa of the Orbiting Human Circus, giving a Q&amp on himself as a Persian and as an artist. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, this is Christy. We are so excited to share this special bonus episode with you. But first, we have some big announcements. If you like the songs the janitor sang on the show, you can get them right now. They will be included on a brand new EP by the Music Tapes called The Orbiting Human Circus on Merge Records. The official release date is Friday, February 10th, and if you're listening to this before the 10th, you can pre-order it. You can get a copy by going to mergerecords.com or orbitinghumancircus.com. And now we wanted to announce that the Orbiting Human Circus will return with Season 2. And stay tuned in the meantime for a different Orbiting Human Circus special presentation coming out this spring right here on our feed. We'll be telling you all about it very soon. The whole gang at the Orbiting Human Circus has enjoyed making this show for you so much and is so grateful you're listening and that we're getting to do this. And we wanted to let you know that if you'd like, you can help us make Season 2. Our sponsors get us part of the way there, but there are so many people who work so many hours to make this show happen. And there are things like recording studios that need to be paid up front and can't wait until the season is released. If you like the show and want to help us start making Season 2, go to orbitinghumancircus.com and click Donate. And know that your listener support will so greatly help make all of this happen. Please know that any amount will help, and if you're able to donate $50 or more, either all at once or over time as part of a recurring donation, we'll send you a special 2-part bonus made just for you. First, this spring, we'll send you a collection of behind-the-scenes recordings from the making of Season 1, including Julian's demos, so you'll get to hear him do things like attempt to do Jacques' voice. And we'll give you special early access to the first episode of Season 2, before it's released to everyone else on our feed. So if you'd like to support the show and help us make Season 2, go to orbitinghumancircus.com and click Donate. And finally, the Orbiting Human Circus will be going on tour in 2017. The first shows will be in North America beginning in mid-April and extending through May, and we'll have those dates for you very soon at orbitinghumancircus.com/shows, with more shows and more places to be added throughout the year.
Hi, this is Drew Callender. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Choosing a mortgage lender is a really big decision, so it's important to work with one that has your best interests in mind. Check out Rocket Mortgage today for a transparent, trustworthy, totally online home loan process by going to quickenloans.com/OHC. That's OHC for Orbiting Human Circus. And now, please sit back and enjoy Episode 9.
Hello, you guys. Hello. I just wanted to say, first of all, it's so nice to be able to just talk to you now. Thank you so much for all of the incredibly kind and wonderful things that so many of you wrote along with your questions. Okay, so now I'm gonna answer some questions. Some of the questions were too good, which means that there are things that are going to be revealed, and I don't want to give anything away that's going to be revealed. I'm just going to talk about things that won't ruin anything if I talk about them. The question that a lot of people asked was, what were some inspirations for the Orbiting Human Circus? Things that I'd heard or listened to, and probably the biggest inspiration for me about what you can do with recorded sound and what that can be actually were these letters that my grandmother used to send me on cassette. She used to make these recordings on tape. She was kind of obsessed with tapes, and she made all these recordings on tape. She was a really, really magical woman. She lived in this crazy rambling house out at the border of Queens in New York, and this place called New Hyde Park, and it was just full of all these old things from a world that didn't exist anymore. I mean, except in her house that I got to play with and be around. And there were all these buckets of rainwater everywhere. She collected rainwater, and I used to get to. I just have all these memories of playing with rainwater, and she used it for all these different things. And she was just an incredibly creative, original, very free-spirited person. And her sisters were blind. So I don't know if this is where it started, but she always did letters. Her letters were cassettes, and she would send me these tapes, and it would be my favorite thing in the world when they would come, and I would put it on, and it would be my grandmother's voice, and she'd be answering questions that I'd asked her in the last tape that I sent her. We'd send the tapes back and forth. I'd record into my tape recorder talking to her, and she'd record into her tape recorder talking to me. And so, much like this, she'd be answering questions, and she'd stop and she'd listen to my tape and listen to more questions and then tell me the answers to those questions. And then she would record things. She would just go places. Like if she was going out somewhere, she'd bring the tape recorder with her, and she'd just hit record, and she'd carry it around, and she'd just record whatever was happening, not even narrating it or anything. Like the tape recorder would just be going for 20 minutes. It would be sometimes a whole side of a cassette. And it was just, you'd be in this environment with her. And so I'd listen to all the sounds, and I'd imagine the things that were happening in the places where she was, and I would disappear into them. I loved her very much. And I'm going to try to make this recording for you guys much in the spirit of those recordings that she made for me. So that's what we're going to do. And all right, I'm going to answer another question. Hold on. So, one question was about the polar bear, and what became of the polar bear. And the answer is that the polar bear was never found. Actually, it disappeared. There were millions and millions of theories, but nobody could figure out what happened to it. And it very quickly became a kind of a folk legend that parents would tell their kids to get them to, come in before it was dark out. They'd tell them that the polar bear was going to get them. But I wanted to strongly encourage everybody not to judge the polar bear. Everything that happened was not its fault. So I ask, if you can, please keep an open mind towards it. Also on the subject of polar bears, another question was, what is Julian's connection to polar bears? And that's a question I'd like to answer. And as is actually the case with a few of these questions, I'm not sure whether the Julian referred to is Julian the janitor, or the particular Julian who's talking to you right now. But actually the answer is exactly the same, which is that the polar bears, the connection to polar bears comes from our great-grandfather. Another question that somebody asked that's good, I think. My favorite things about the world are things that are sort of the meeting place between the imaginary and the real. Like the Great Recitating Platypus. The Great Recitating Platypus is one of those stories that parents tell their kids, and it's passed down from generation to generation, and the story is something that the parents know is really a dream. It's like, if your child is sick, the idea is if they're good, then the platypus will come when they're asleep and will recite these poems while they're sleeping, and then they'll wake up, the kids will wake up healthy. And by the parent lovingly telling their kid that story, they're sort of creating the perfect circumstances for the kid to have that dream. And, if the kid does have that dream, like many things in life, it's very likely that while the dream is an imaginary thing, they will feel better. And of course, if they wake up and a bit of the dream lingers, as it can and does, and they see the platypus and they make a wish, anyone, I think we've all been alive. If you've been alive for a while, you definitely have seen pretty irrefutable proof that if somebody really believes that something they've wished for is going to happen, it's much, much more likely to happen than in any other circumstance. And for the kids, it can be real the way that imaginary things for kids can be real, which is, I think, to say that there isn't really a wall yet. They don't need necessarily a wall between what is quote unquote real and what is not real, because I think for a kid the functionality of imaginary things is just so clear and present. It doesn't need to be delineated or separated out. But to me, I feel like so many of the most important things in the world and in this universe are in the realm of what you'd call imaginary. Like the parents lovingly telling kids a story like the Great Recitating Platypus or Santa Claus or anything is an act of love, and that love is not material. There aren't any material representations of love. There's just material expressions of love, and I don't think there's anything in the world more important to those parents or to those kids or anybody than love. And so I think so much of the substance of life actually is what you would describe as imaginary, and only really a part of the substance of life is real, what you'd call real. And yes, one big question that got asked that I think is pretty neat is were there things that were in season 1 or in episodes that didn't make the cut for different reasons? And the answer to that question is yes. There's a lot of things, and several people asked if those things existed, if I could tell you about some of them. So I thought that'd be kind of fun. And one that I really like that the janitor told was actually about, I think this is going to possibly scandalize some people, but it is in universe, so I think it's okay. But anyway, one thing the janitor told about was these visits of a special friend of John Cameron's to the set of the Orbiting Human Circus, to the ballroom. A very special friend of his named Carrie. His real name isn't Carrie. His real name is Archibald. John Cameron calls him Archibald, and that's how the janitor knew this. But everybody else knew him as Carrie, and he's a very special friend of John's. As a matter of fact, there were a lot of rumors about the fact that they were very, very special friends, and the janitor did see something that reinforced that idea very strongly one time. Something innocent, but something that led on that they were more than friends. And everyone in the Orbiting Human Circus would freak out, of course, when this fellow would come visit, which would be a few times a year, because he's a movie star, and so everybody was kind of dazzled. And the janitor had seen him in movies. The janitor's one of the janitor's favorite movies was called Holiday, and Carrie was in this movie, and the janitor just was completely starstruck whenever he'd come around, and he was just a very, very sweet person, and he was very, very elegant and handsome. I don't think the janitor had a crush on him or anything like that. But he was just incredibly objectively handsome, which and kind, and so when he would visit, it would always be this very interesting thing, and I think he kind of fascinated the janitor, and watching Archibald and John together was very fascinating for the janitor, and so there are different stories associated with his visits that hopefully some of which will make it into season 2. I hope I haven't just ruined season 2 for you. I mean, it's not really, it's a small thing, but that was something that, as a matter of fact, the jacket that John Cameron gave to the janitor was actually Carrie's. It was something that Carrie had left behind, and Carrie always leaves his clothes everywhere. He's very forgetful, and being a movie star, he could afford lots and lots of jackets. So that was actually where the jacket that John Cameron passed on to the janitor came from. Another thing that's an answer to another question that I think would be fun to tell is that it was a question about the hypnosis episode, when the janitor accidentally hypnotized everybody, and the janitor himself was hypnotized into believing his greatest fantasy, which was singing on the show, was happening. And the question was about the janitor forgiving John Cameron and John Cameron's motivations. And one thing that I think is pretty important or worth knowing, which was that I don't believe that John Cameron knew what the hypnotist was going to do. I think he knew that the hypnotist needed subjects, and he knew John Cameron, like everybody, had heard the janitor's great-grandfather is the stage hypnotist, of course, and so John knew that stage hypnosis was really special to the janitor, and he knew the janitor was was excited about the hypnotist coming, and he wanted to do something nice for him. And so I think in John's mind, he thought he was doing something really, really sweet by letting the janitor come on the show and be a subject, but he wanted it to be a surprise. And so when the hypnotist brought the janitor out, and the kiddie pool came out, and the lederhosen, and the janitor was in a trance, and I think John was a little bit horrified, or it wasn't. I don't know if horrified's the right word. I think he was turning red. But John is, as you've seen, one of the truly great and consummate natural showmen, and that he shares something in common with his John Cameron Mitchell, who portrays him, in my opinion. And so John just did what John Cameron would do, which is kind of turn red and play along with it, and ultimately keep the show going. He couldn't really focus on those feelings. That's a tough show to keep running. So that's kind of what happened there. Another question that somebody asked was how much of the janitor's story is real versus part of his imagination. In contrast, I imagine, to the radio show, and so things like his great grandpa and his polar bear boyfriend and all of that. And the answer to that question is that all of those things are real. One question that was asked was, are the people of the orbiting human circus, and I think that means Jacques and Letitia and Francois and Pierre and John Cameron, are those people from the janitor's life, or were they people that he completely imagined? And the answer is, which you would find out anyway, will find out, but I think I can tell you. The answer is that they are all people from his life, from his real life, not his imagination. They're all people that he has a relationship to and that he knows. And his imaginings of them, which is what you experienced in the show sequences, were very much like them. And some of them are even based on real experiences he had with those people. Just some of the superficial details were mushed around. Others of those experiences were his imaginings of interactions he might have, and imaginings inspired by his understanding of those people, or his interest in, or his affection for, or his fear of, depending, of those people. And you'll get to know them even better. So, their roles in real life and the things that they do might be slightly different, but even that is, I think, in a pretty neat way. So there. Oh, another big question that a lot of you asked was, is Julian not straight? And like the polar bear question and a couple of other questions, I don't know for sure if the question was referring to me or the janitor, but I understand the question really well, because I know how important it can be at different points in people's lives to be able to relate to, to find characters in things that they love or like, that they can relate to, or to find people who make things that they like, that they can relate to, or they feel like are like them. And so I'm happy to answer that question on both of our behalfs, me and the janitor. And the answer is the same. Neither of us are straight. Another question about Letitia was, what's the heaviest item that Letitia can deadlift? And all I have to say is that she didn't really need the hand truck to lift the polar bear box up the stairs. As a matter of fact, the hand truck wasn't originally in the script. One question about Jacques that someone asked was, is Jacques as tough as he thinks he is? And the answer to that, I think, is Letitia is as tough as Jacques thinks he is. I think Letitia beat him at arm wrestling, although I think he really doesn't like to talk about that or think about that. Okay, a really good question that I got was, can all crickets tell stories? And the answer to that is yes. Crickets are the greatest storytellers in the world. And it is true that if a bird catches a cricket, it gives it a chance to tell a story, and if it's a good one, the bird will spare the cricket's life. All of that is absolutely true. So somebody asked me how the narrator first met the janitor, or how the janitor first met the narrator. And they first met when the janitor was quite little. It was the first time that the janitor ever tried to sneak out of the house. His stepdad tied these sleigh bells to the doorknob of the house, he said, to keep burglars away, but it was probably to keep the janitor in. And the floorboards creaked and stuff like that, and the janitor's parents left the door to their bedroom open to hear what he was doing. But he did try to sneak out this one time, and as he was trying to do it, he just found himself narrating his experience, which made him feel more like he was in a story, or was a hero movie or something, and he was able to follow through with sneaking out. Now, you all know from when the janitor talked about it in episode 2 that about the time that the janitor's stepdad hit him in the ear, and of course there was the ringing in the janitor's ear, and then that ringing actually turned into this like sound that was kind of like it was kind of like an audience, and the janitor had been imagining that there was an audience, and suddenly the janitor was just filled with this feeling that there were all these people there cheering for him and supporting him, and he didn't cry. And he stood up to his stepfather for the first time, and he was able to stand up to his stepfather because he just felt like he had all those people behind him, that everyone was with him and rooting for him. And that sound in his ear actually stayed for quite a long time. And so did the feeling that the audience was with him, and that was how he started imagining that he had an audience, and that feeling gave him the strength and the courage to run away. Now, somebody asked if in the show the narrator was addressing the janitor's imaginary audience or the janitor himself. And the answer is both. Because in the end, when the platypus finally came for the janitor after he'd spent his whole life hoping it would, and the janitor made that wish, it was, the janitor knows that the platypus is just a dream. But he also believes that if you see it and you make that wish, that it'll come true, and he believes that his wish came true and that you exist. And, of course for him that's just a matter of faith. He's right. Someone asked if that wish made the radio show, The Orbiting Human Circus, real as well. And I think the answer to that is, if you exist and you've been listening to it, well then, it's a real show. Thank you, and bye.
Hello again, this is Drew. Ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to have my own rocket. I was so pleased to hear there was a company that actually gave you mortgages to get one. We know that buying a rocket or a home is a big decision, and so is choosing a mortgage lender. So it's important to work with someone you can trust, who has your best interests in mind. With Rocket Mortgage, you'll get a transparent online process that gives you the confidence to make an informed decision. And you can securely share your financial info to get a mortgage approval in minutes. Whether you're looking to buy a home or a rocket or refinance your existing mortgage, you can lift the burden of getting a home loan with Rocket Mortgage. So skip the bank, skip the waiting, and go completely online with Rocket Mortgage at quickenloans.com/OHC. That's OHC for Orbiting Human Circus. Equal housing lender licensed in all 50 states. NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
And this is Christy again. We wanted to thank everyone involved in making this show happen, including you. The Orbiting Human Circus of the Air was written, created, and co-directed by Julian Costa. Co-directed by and developed with Ellie Heyman, and further developed with the cast of the Orbiting Human Circus. It was produced by Christy Gressman, with musical composition and arrangement by Thomas Hughes, and music by the Music Tapes. And associate producer Robbie Cucciaro, sound design by Eric Slider and Julian, chief recording engineer Vincent Caccioni, and editing by Grant Stewart and Julian. It features Julian as the janitor, Drew Callender as the narrator, John Cameron Mitchell as Mr. Cameron, Susanna Flood as Letitia, Dan Solomon as Jacques, John Sergeski as Pierre, Ron Berman as Francois, and Walter Lowry as Coco, with Tim Robbins as the Cricket, Mandy Patinkin as Cantor Moishe Leibowitz, Cecil Baldwin as Professor Edelweiss Fleur, Professor Sogling, crane operator, French nobleman, and screaming nun, David Barlow as Mr. Chouinard, Shepherd Number 7, and Aunt Helga, Meg Bashwinner as switchboard operator, horrified mother, Lady Macbeth, and screaming nun, Ben Chase as Professor Heimlich Ipephil, Shannon Conley as Yermak, the pie-eating Cossack, Robbie Cucciaro as the paramedic, Charlie Day as Macbeth, Brian Dewan as the spokesperson of the Perpetual Broadcasting Corporation, Mary Elizabeth Ellis as Lady Macbeth, Chris Ferry as the ambassador to Newark, J.J. Gonson as third-grade teacher whistling the saber dance, Joan Hirsch as herself, Dennis Koster as Roma guitarist, Becky Lauer as switchboard operator, Eric Lochtefeld as the Three Witches, Gavin Roca as Jimmy, and Vin Roca as Fido, Larry Ratzo Sloman as the Santa Claus, Jesse Shelton as Venetia Burney and Countess Margot, Chaim Wolf as Brooklyn Bagel Bakers and Angry Father, and the Alicia Spiegel's Klezmer Ensemble, featuring the late Evan Harlan, Julian's uncle, on accordion, and North, the singing saw, with Presto Lathe recording by Steve Espinola, sound design assistance from Aaron Artisan, production managing by Christy, Callie Jane Farnsworth, Mary Ellen Stebbins, and Blaise Ferrer, additional creative contributions from Jeff Mangum, James Anderson, Drew Callender, Ben Chase, Brian Dewan, Susanna Flood, Andy Lauer, and Peter Tedeschi. Logo by Christy and Julian, copywriting by Andy Lauer, and of course, gowns by Lilith. And again, if you want to help us make Season 2, go to orbitinghumancircus.com and click Donate. If you give more than $50, either all at once or over time, you'll get Julian's demos from Season 1 and early access to Episode 1 of Season 2. And thank you so very much. We have absolutely loved getting to make this, and we are so glad you're out there. We'll see you again very soon.
Hello, everybody. This is Julian again. I just wanted to say goodbye, and the Orbiting Human Circus wishes you a good night.
It is truly like transporting to another world when I hear his music. Anyways, here is legendary lecturer Terence McKenna giving his stance on art. Enjoy.
Culture, and this is my message to artists and to anybody else who cares to notice, culture is a plot against the expansion of consciousness. And this plot prosecutes its goals through a limiting of language. Language is the battleground over which the fight will take place, because what we cannot say, we cannot communicate. And by say, I mean dance, paint, sing, meme. What we cannot say, we cannot communicate. We can conceive of things that we cannot communicate. And I think every one of us here has done that. And that's a thrilling thing. That is the deep homework. The psychedelic inner astronaut sees things which no human being has ever seen before, and no human being will ever see again. But in fact, this has no meaning unless it is possible to carry it back into the collectivity. And what motivates me to talk to groups like this is the belief that we do not have centuries of gently unfolding time ahead of us in which to gently tease apart the threads of the human endeavor and create a bright new world. That's not our circumstance. This is a fire in a madhouse. And to get a hold on the situation, I think we are going to have to force the issue. Well, one way of forcing the issue, or a chemical definition of forcing the issue when you're talking about a chemical reaction, is catalysis. We want to catalyze consciousness. We want to move it faster toward its goals, whatever those goals are. Well, I believe that to the present moment, language, again in the broadest sense, speech, dance, musical composition, language has just been allowed to grow like topsy. It's been a kind of every man for himself situation. Now, what we really need, as we see ourselves moving from one species among tens of thousands of species on this planet, over the past 10,000 years, we have redefined ourselves. And now, like it or not, we are the custodians of the destiny of this planet. Our decisions affect every life form on the planet. And yet, we are still communicating with each other with the extremely precise medium of small mouth noises mediated by ignorance and hate. This doesn't seem like the way to do business as we approach the third millennium. So what I'm hopeful for, and what I actually see happening, I think that we're on the right track. The birth of a new kind of humanity is going to take place, but there are still a lot of decisions to be made. How violent shall this birth be? What toll shall it take upon our mother, the earth? What shape shall the baby be in when it finally is delivered? These are the decisions that artists can mediate and control. Most people are afraid of the unconscious. This is why You can have a psychedelic compound like DMT, which is very much like ordinary brain chemistry, appears completely physiologically harmless, only lasts 10 minutes, extremely powerful, and generally in this society you have no takers. This is because there has been a failure of moral courage. And the failure of moral courage is perhaps most evident in our own community, the community of the artists. In a way, it's the poets that have failed us because they have not provided a song or sung a vision that we could all move in concert to. So now we are in the absurd position of being able to do anything, and what we are doing is fouling our own nest and pushing ourselves toward planetary toxification and extinction. This is because the poets, the artists, have not articulated a moral vision. The moral vision must come from the unconscious. It doesn't have to do, I believe, with these post-meaning movements in art, deconstructionism, and this sort of thing. I mean, I'm basically putting out a very conservative, but I think exciting program for art. That art's task is to save the soul of mankind, and that anything less is a dithering while Rome burns. Because if the artists who are self-selected for being able to journey into the other, if the artist cannot find the way, then the way cannot be found. Ideology is extremely alien to art. Political ideology, I mean. And if you will but notice, it is political ideology that has been calling the shots for the last 700 or 800 years. We can transcend politics if we can put some other program in place. You cannot transcend politics into a void. And I believe that a world without ideology could be created if what were put in place of ideology were the notion of the realization of the good, the true, and the beautiful. You know, the three-tiered canon of the Platonic aesthetic. Reconnect the notion of the good, the true, and the beautiful. Then use psychedelics to empower the artists to go into this vast dimension that surrounds human history on all sides to an infinite depth, and return from that world with the transcendental images that can lift us to a new cultural level. The muse is there. The dull maps that rationalism has given us are nothing more than whistling past the graveyard by the bad little boys of science. You only have to avail yourselves of these shamanic tools to rediscover a nature which is not mute, as Sartre said in a kind of culmination of the modern viewpoint. Nature is not mute. It is man who is deaf. And the way to open our ears, open our eyes, and reconnect with the intent of a living world is through the psychedelics. Now, as you know, biology runs on genes, and genes are the units of meaning of heredity. But we could make a model of the informational environment that is represented by culture. And in fact, this is done. A word has been invented, meme, M-E-M-E, meme. A meme is not the smallest unit of heredity. A meme is the smallest unit of meaning of an idea. Ideas are made of memes. And I think the art community might function with more efficiency in the production of visionary aesthetic breakthroughs if we would think of ourselves as an environment modeled after the natural environment, where we as artists are attempting to create memes which enter an environment of other memes that are in competition with each other, and out of this competition of memes, ever more appropriate, adapted, and suitable ideas can gather and link themselves together into higher and higher organisms. Now, in order for this to happen, there is an obligation upon each one of us to carry our ideas clearly, because in the same way that a gene must be copied correctly to be replicated, or it will cause some pathological mutation, a meme must be correctly replicated, or it will cause a pathological mutation. For instance, I would say what the Nazis did to Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy was a miscopied meme became a toxic mutation inside a culture. So I would suggest to the people in this room tonight that you take a good look around at who's here. Artistic people, psychedelic people look pretty much like everybody else out in society. But we have come here tonight self-selected for our interest in the empowering capacity of psychedelic plants and the empowering capacity of art. So we represent an affinity group, a population with a potential for mutagenic impact on the ideological structures of the rest of society. So look around. Someone here has what you need. And if you can only figure out who it is, you can make a novel connection to move them into a new level of creativity. Well, what is this new level of creativity?
He was truly a gift to mankind. Now we will listen to an interview with legendary musician John Cage and his insights as an artistic genius. Then we will have the very special privilege of listening to one of the best albums of all time, Curse of the Seven Jekylls. Enjoy.
Does. But I write a kind of music which discovers a sound that has not yet been heard.
Artist George Brock once said, "As you become older, art and life become the same thing. What follows is a testimonial to that statement." The next half hour is called "I'm Too Busy to Talk Now, Conversations with American Artists Over 70. I'm Connie Goldman, and this is composer John Cage.
I use my work to open myself to the rest of life, rather than using my work to impose myself or to express myself to other people.
At age 74, John Cage radiates childlike charm and gentle wit. His life is a busy and active one, which includes travel, friends, avocations, and diversions, and of course, his continuing work. His home and studio are in a large Soho loft in New York City that he shares with choreographer Merce Cunningham. The place is furnished simply and is full of light that nourishes an indoor garden of hundreds of exotic plants. The central element in Cage's life remains his work. As a force in contemporary music, John Cage has a monumental stature. Yet his compositions and performances have often been considered eccentric and monotonous, but brilliant. It's been said that he has had a greater impact on world music than any other American composer of the 20th century. In Europe, his works are described as characteristically American, while here in America, his music is often labeled unlistenable or absurd. John Cage has his own logic.
I searched for another reason for making music than communicating my feelings. And I found it through an Indian musician who was disturbed over the effect that Western music was having on Indian music. And she studied Western music in a concentrated fashion for about 9 months here in New York. And she studied, among other teachers, she studied with me a survey of contemporary music and counterpoint. And I asked her what her teacher had said was the purpose of music. And she said to sober and quiet the mind, thus making it susceptible to divine influences. And Lou Harrison, another composer, was concerned about why he was writing music. And he found an English composer, Thomas Mace, I think in the 16th century, saying the purpose of music is to sober and quiet the mind, thus making it susceptible to divine influences. So coming from England and from India and from such different times, I decided to take that as the true answer rather than the one I had been taught, which was having an idea or having a feeling and expressing it.
Then there's been a great change in your whole creative process.
Yes.
And how you've gone about it.
Yes, and the central piece in that change is called The Music of Changes. The title is also derived from the ancient Chinese book in which you obtain the answer to a question by tossing 3 coins 6 times, or the yarrow sticks, which is called the Book of Changes, the I Ching. And when I found that book in the early 50s, I began almost immediately making a way of composing, which was through the use of chance operations, and I shifted my whole work from making choices to asking questions and then taking the answers that were provided by chance operations.
And you still compose in this manner, by chance, with the I Ching?
I do. And now I will go faster by means of the computer and word processor, because that works in the same way. All computer programming is basically question asking, rather than choice making.
Although most of the music you'll hear during this presentation is composed and performed by a musician influenced by Cage, what follows is a recording of Cage's own work, The Music of Changes. There have been many times during your career when people have written and spoken very negatively of your work. They've done everything from laugh at it to demean it to say it's worthless.
A friend of mine refers to my career as checkered.
I want you
or would you call it entirely black?
Well, I guess I want to know what you'd call it. I want to know your reaction to their reaction.
Oh, I don't have any reaction to that. That is their business. I do what I do, and then people respond in the way that they do. I do notice that the numbers of people interested in my work has increased. in 1952, if I gave a concert, not more than 120 people would show up. But now if I give a concert, I can easily get between 2,000 and 4,000 people.
How do you protect yourself from what other people say? Or the fact that now many people think you're the most important person in American music?
No, I don't really do it that way. I remain a person who has not done anything. And the work that is finished is just work that has, so to speak, its life, which may live and may not.
So anything you create, anything you write, anything...
has its own life rather than my life. Has its life rather than my life.
And it's always a new beginning for you.
Right. So that I'm independent of my work. I wish it well, so to speak. But I'm concerned with the work that I haven't yet made. I'm not concerned with the work that I've finished.
One wonders in amazement what John Cage will produce next. His past works have incorporated such sounds as audio frequency oscillators, buzzers, gongs, fire sirens, whistles, and an element very important to Cage, the sound of silence. Composer Aaron Copland observes that Cage isn't interested in creating great eternal masterpieces, but in amusing himself on the highest level with new notions concerning music. John Cage would agree.
My father was an inventor, so that I grew up in the atmosphere of the necessity of having new ideas, of making discoveries. I knew from the beginning that the only thing I would be able to do that would be useful to the society as a whole would be to make some kind of discovery. That was my business, so to speak. But then I kept remembering my father, and he was alive then still, and still making new inventions in the field of electrical engineering and so on. And I thought, I'll just put my mind to finding, if I can, something new in the field of music. And that's how the whole thing has continued. In other words, I've thought that rather than explaining things and making them clear, that it was best to provide people with something to experience. And the experience should be as new as going to a new country or as getting lost in the woods.
Is that how you feel now, or is that how you felt then when you were just beginning this?
It's more or less then and now. I remember a lady in Chicago saying, "Oh, when you get older, you'll mellow." And the suggestion was that I would get soft, and that I would become content more easily. And I wouldn't be looking for something so irritatingly new. But I don't think that's happened.
Maybe exactly the opposite has happened.
That I've gotten worse.
More adventurous. Always looking for something new, not content a bit.
Actually, rather than it's being one continuous line, I have more the feeling that there are certain years when I'm more active than in other years. I was very active in 1952. That was the year that I wrote the 433, which was the silent piece. Also the piece for 12 radios. And I finished the Music of Changes, which was the first piece written entirely with chance operations. And I think I finished the Williams mix then. The number of pieces that I wrote that year is quite astonishing, even in retrospect. I have the feeling that happened this last year, too, which is, what is it? It's 30 years later. And I did a really astonishing amount of work. It was as though things were happening more fluently, quickly and without any difficulty. A string quartet, a piece for organ, 8 pieces for oboe, a piece for percussion. I just finished 9 songs, and that's simply the amount of work since August.
With the passing years, John Cage has never lost his lighthearted approach. His friends consider him a serious man with a frolicsome touch. Subjects that he takes very seriously, such as his macrobiotic diet and general health care, are viewed with both concern and humor.
As I get older, I become more concerned about being healthy. And so, in one of my texts, I say, when I die, I'll be in perfect condition. Because for the first time in my life, my teeth will all be well fixed. There won't be any cavities and so forth. And everything else will be well. I'll simply die a natural death or through some accidental event.
Have you really changed your attitude towards your body and what it'll tolerate?
Well, I used to think that the mind and the spirit, so to speak, were superior to the body. But then a time came, I forget just when it was. I was on tour with the Cunningham Dance Company and we were in Venezuela, when I'd always had some trouble with my back. And this time I hurt my back so much that it was painful to do anything, to move, and I was crawling around on all fours, and yet I managed to stand up and bow at the end of a performance and so on. It was very difficult. Finally, I was helped by a doctor there who gave me a drug to take the pain away, and then he insisted that I do certain exercises. And he said by the time the drug wore off, if I did the exercises, I would have strengthened the muscles sufficiently, and that I should continue in my life doing exercises. Well, before I had never done any, but now I do them every day. What has happened is that I've seen that the body is part and parcel of the whole being, so that there isn't a split between the mind and the body. They both belong together. When I was younger, and I mistreated the body because I thought the mind was what I was really dealing with. But as I get older, I see that I'm really dealing quite straightforwardly with the body, and that I must keep it in good working order as long as I can.
Although Cage's reputation is primarily a result of his compositions, he also has a substantial reputation as an expert on mushrooms. But this is only one of many interests.
I generally have 2 or 3 projects going simultaneously, so that when one is finished, another one is continued. There's always something going on. And I find my interests as I get older multiply rather than get less in number. As you can see, I'm interested in indoor gardening, and I'm interested in cooking, macrobiotic cooking. And my latest new interest is the collection of rocks, where in all my travels I collect either small rocks, or if I have the facility, I get big ones. The ones behind you are quite heavy. I not only am interested in collecting them and having them in the garden, but I've turned them into the making of etchings and of drawings, and now into the composing of music. So that my songs are simply made by drawing around the rocks. Not all the way around, but because music goes from left to right, and you can't go backwards in music, but I draw a part of the rock.
How do these new interests come upon you?
Through circumstances, and through being open to the world, to the things that happen, rather than being closed through my intentions. So that as something new appears in my experience, I open the door to it rather than closing the door.
Historians and music critics would agree that John Cage's readiness to try new things has provided an original approach to music and a unique collection of writings and lectures. The direction of American dance in our time has also been affected by the Cage imagination. Among others, his music has profoundly influenced the presentations of the Merce Cunningham Dance Company, and his original thinking may also affect our views on aging.
I think that growing old in a happy way derives from not having been employed. So that I never had a job. I was self-employed, as my father was. He was an inventor. He never had a job either, and he was born in 1886. So that he was working the very day he died. He was having new ideas in relation to his invention in the morning, and then after lunch he lay down to rest, he told Mother, and she heard a strange sound and he was dead. But he was working the very day he died. There was no shift in his life from being employed to not being employed.
From being productive to being something else.
So that he was unemployed his whole life, which is to say he was self-employed throughout his life. I think that people who have jobs and who will eventually lose them should practice being self-employed while they're employed.
Explain how you would suggest they do that.
What I mean is that in self-employment is the secret of enjoying old age.
Talk some more about it, about what those attitudes are, or what that does for you.
That means that no matter how old you are, if you're self-employed, you will see each day as useful. The only reason that people accept jobs that are not interesting is in order to make money. In other words, they think that money is important and that life is not. What we need to do is to be willing to die for what gives us life. I knew that I loved music, and I was willing to die for it. So I didn't approach music as something that would make money for me. If I needed money, I then took a job that would make money, such as washing dishes or washing walls or distributing circulars for an advertising campaign or something like that. I never was well-to-do until after I was 50. Now I'm, you could say, well-to-do, but it's because I've written so many books and written so much music that royalties are sufficient to keep me going.
If you must work at a routine job to make a living and expect to be, as you say, retired at a certain age or a certain stage, how do you learn to keep alive some kind of creativity?
Most people will have to do it themselves. Everyone who went to school learned how to read and write. Therefore, I have the idea that everyone is a poet. So you could spend your life writing poetry. And you could begin while you were employed, say, as a secretary or as a computer programmer. You could each day put aside a little time in which you employed yourself to be a poet. Then when you lost your job or were retired, you would know that you could go on writing poetry.
What might you say to an older person that hasn't had this kind of orientation to life, that has had a life of work or a harder life, and now is living in their own kind of isolation because society doesn't want them anymore? What might you say to them? Maybe you could say something that would make them look inward and find...
I would suggest that they write a poem so that they could read it to their friends the next day, write a poem for each day. Why not? And if they don't like to write poetry or don't like to write music, could try making a drawing. My drawings are made by drawing around the stones that I collect. I don't have to know how to draw. The rock teaches me where to put the pencil. I think many people think that art is something mysterious that only belongs to certain people, whereas everyone has access to it. I had a walk once with Toby. He was a great artist, and it was in Seattle. I was married then to Ksenia, and we walked very slowly because Toby was constantly seeing something that he wanted to point out, and it wasn't something like a mountain. It was more something like cracks in the pavement, or something on the wall of a house where something had fallen off. But his eye was absolutely open constantly to the world around him. And I think that walk not only helped my seeing, but I shifted it over also to my hearing, so that I listen all the time to the sounds of the environment wherever I am. And this year, in contrast to previous years of my life, I'm beginning to hear the constant sounds, like the sound of that humidifier that I used to ignore in order to hear, say, the more changing sound of the traffic. And most people would ignore the traffic in order to hear a little music. But now I'm beginning to be interested in the humidifier and the refrigerator when it makes a sound, and any other thing which has a kind of constant and for most people irritating sound. But those sounds are beginning to define the space for me, so that I know through those sounds the nature of the space that I'm living in. And it's giving me a great deal of pleasure, because those were the sounds which I didn't really accept, which I tried to ignore. And now more and more I don't hear anything without enjoying hearing it, including those constant utilitarian sounds. If you can enjoy the worst things, then the rest is easy. I can make that, I think, clearer by saying this. You remember earlier in our conversation I spoke of the Indian reason for making music was to sober and quiet the mind, thus making it susceptible to divine influences. Well, first, what is the sober and quiet mind? And I decided that I wouldn't think of a sober and quiet mind as being one which required being in a sober and quiet place. I knew that in the 20th century we had to be able to live in New York City. So I thought a sober and quiet mind in this day and age will have to be sober and quiet in a noisy situation. And it's that has been my guiding principle, so that finally those noises, and now even these constant ones, strike me as being divine influences. Because we become quiet in our minds, that is to say, free of our likes and dislikes, in order to receive whatever the environment gives us as something good.
Is there something you think creative in everybody?
Well, if there isn't, there ought to be. If you go to sleep, you wake up with energy. and you either use that energy yourself in terms of self-employment, or you use the energy in relation to someone who tells you what to do. If someone is telling you what to do, then I'm advising you to supplement that with telling yourself something to do. So that when they stop telling you what to do, you will then be able to go on telling yourself what to do.
John Cage, composer, author, and his one perceptive friend called him a visionary who has a dream. A man filled with childlike wonder, yet a man as pragmatic as any Yankee tinkerer. I'm Connie Goldman, and this has been I'm Too Busy to Talk Now, Conversations with American Artists Over 70. This program was made possible by grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and Norman Lear. The associate producer for this program was John Weber. Music was composed and performed by Tim Eierman and Bruce Harrison. The presenting public radio station for the series is WHA, Wisconsin Public Radio. To purchase a cassette copy of this conversation with John Cage, or for information on obtaining other programs in the I'm Too Busy to Talk Now series, call this toll-free number, 1-800-262-6243, Department AP. Again, that's 1-800-262-6243, Department AP.
Producer Connie Goldman taped this interview with John Cage in the mid-'80s, and we aired it today as a special tribute to mark the recent death of this artistic and musical genius. You're listening to Newsstand on KCRW Santa Monica. Tomorrow at 12:25 on Real Politics, Harold Meyerson, executive editor of LA Weekly, discusses the political fallout of the California budget debacle. His guest will be Bill Bradley, editor of the political newspaper.
He never fails to give amazing insights. Now we will listen to Curse of the Seven Jekylls, a very personal album to me and to probably everyone in the One-Eyed Peacock universe. Please listen with an open heart. Thank you for listening.
The search for blood replacement fluids began centuries ago. Doctors of the past tried replacing blood with other fluids, such as milk or wine, in hopes that diseases could be cured, or even that personalities could be changed. While these experiments failed, Synthetic Blood Industries has created a viable blood substitute. The modern drive to create synthetic blood began with the World Wars. The military desired blood which could be used immediately in battlefield conditions without special storage and without having to match specific blood types. Another major force to create synthetic blood comes from the increasing shortage of blood in blood banks. It is feared that in the future the number of persons needing blood transfusions will far exceed the number of donors. Synthetic Blood Industries has developed a synthetic blood product which can meet this growing need for a blood supply. The estimated global market for blood substitution is within $6 to $8 billion annually. Synthetic Blood Industries has developed a synthetic blood which is in the final stages of its clinical trials. There are no damaging side effects. All that remains is to find willing individuals to test synthetic blood in a realistic, variable environment.
First number is N36. B2. G54. I-27. G56. N42. G60. B8. I-21. O68. N31. I-16. B10. I-24. N32.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, just wanted to talk to someone about something.
How?
I'm 22.
When you were born?
I was born in 76.
You graduate high school?
Mm-hmm. But, I know it's going to sound strange, but I wanted to talk to someone about Egypt.
Well, I can't talk to you about Egypt or anything else because I don't think you're 22.
I am, I swear.
Well, you could have been born in 76.
I know.
So how old are you?
20. That's old enough, right?
That's 20's old enough. What year were you born?
I was born in 78.
Well, you're still off the mark, so I'm terminating the call.
No, please.
God of all, God of the Egyptian gods, God of the Egyptian monks, I am Imhotep. I cannot be destroyed. With the power of synthetic blood in my veins, I can see all. I can feel all. I can know the thoughts of the gods, for I am a god myself. Oh, wrathful, vengeful gods, why are you forsaking me for this crusted earth? I long to join you. Please let me join you. My fellow brothers, my brother gods, please let me join you. With synthetic blood through my veins, I am worthy of your love and admiration. Please take me back. Take me from this earth, this cruel, twisted, ridiculous planet. Please bring me back to my home. I am Imhotep, your brother. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I am a god. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I am a god. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I am a god. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I am a god. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I am a god. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I am a god. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I am a god. I am a god. Bernard is a god. I'm a god. I'm a god. I'm a god. I'm a god. Bernard is a god. Bernard is a god. I'm a god. I'm a god. I'm a god. I'm a god. Bernard is a god. Bernard is a god. Bernard is a god. Bernard is a god.
Get up real close to that microphone now, honey. Get up there real close to that thing. Try not to run off this time. Try one more time for Helen. One more time for Helen here. Come on, Helen.